Welcome back, viewers, and let's continue with the story in its final chapter, The Archivist's Ledger. As Nora narrates her story, let's hear it.
Freedom. That's what I thought I had. After everything, the diary, the endless loops, the fractured memories, I believed it was finally over. The little green book was gone. The cycle was broken. My life, my real life, was finally my own again. I could wake up in the morning and not question the date on the calendar. I could walk through the library where I worked and just be Nora Bennett, the quiet librarian, not a prisoner of time. But freedom, I was about to learn, is a fragile thing, a temporary illusion, and my story was far from finished. It was just changing. It started subtly, like a flaw in a photograph you don't notice at first. Whispers. They came from the rare book vault, the most silent, most sacred place in the entire library. Soft voices like the rustling of ancient paper, echoing in languages I'd never heard, but somehow felt I should understand. I'd dismiss it as the old building settling, the wind whistling through a crack in the window. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to follow me through the stacks, winding around shelves of forgotten history. I tried to ignore them, focusing on the familiar scent of old books and lemon polish, the comforting weight of a hardback in my hands. Then came the shadows. They flickered at the edge of my vision, dark shapes moving just beyond the periphery. When I turned my head, nothing would be there. Just the long, still rows of books, standing like silent soldiers. Was I losing my mind? Was this some after effect of the loop? A psychic scar left behind by the diary. The rational part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through the worst of it, scrambled for an explanation. Stress, lack of sleep, my imagination running wild. But deep down, a cold dread began to bloom. This felt different. This felt external. It wasn't my mind playing tricks on me. Something was playing tricks on my reality. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place with the dreams. They weren't the fragmented, terrifying loops of before. These were vivid, impossibly real. And they weren't my life. One night, I was a painter in Paris, the year 1892. My hands, stained with cerulean blue and burnt sienna, moved across the canvas, capturing the light over the stain. I could feel the rough fabric of my smock, taste the cheap wine on my lips. My name, whispered by a lover with a dark mustache, was Elise, but I was still Nora. Another night, I was a physicist in a gleaming city in the year 2147. I was working on a quantum entanglement drive, the fate of a colony on a distant moon resting on my calculations. My name was Anya, my mind a sharp, brilliant tool. But I was still Nora. Dozens of lives, dozens of Noras, spread across time like scattered seeds. A codebreaker during a war. A botanist in a forgotten jungle. A musician whose melodies could soothe storms. Each dream was a complete life lived in the space of a single night. And each one ended the same way. The details would blur, the world would fade to gray, and I would find myself in a quiet room, a familiar weight in my hand. My hand, whether it was Elise's or Anya's or someone else's, was writing in a small green leather-bound book. The diary. My diary. The very thing I thought I had escaped. I would wake up with my heart pounding, the ghost of an ink-stained pen on my fingers, the scent of old leather in my nose. The loop wasn't broken. It had just expanded. I started to think I was truly alone in this, a singular anomaly in the universe. But I wasn't. The proof arrived on a Tuesday night during a thunderstorm, a knock on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Outside, there was no one, just the rain-slicked hallway. But on my doormat sat a package, a simple brown box wrapped in twine. No return address, no postage stamp. It was just there. My hands trembled as I brought it inside. It felt heavy, ancient. Ripping open the paper, I found a book. But it wasn't a diary. This was something else entirely. It was a ledger, thick and imposing, bound in what looked like cracked obsidian black leather. It felt cold to the touch, absorbing the light in the room. On the cover, embossed in a dull silver-like material, was a symbol, a single unblinking eye nested within an intricate spiral. It seemed to stare right through me. With a deep, shaky breath, I opened it. The pages were thick like vellum and covered in elegant, spidery handwriting that shifted and changed from one page to the next. They were filled with names, thousands of them, stretching back through what must have been centuries. Each name was followed by a date, a location, and a final cryptic entry. Marcus Thorne, loop collapsed, status, lost. Isabelle Dubois, timeline stabilized, status, retired. And then my heart stopped. Near the end of the book, written in a hand that was eerily similar to my own, was my name. Nora Bennett, loop broken, status, unstable, unstable. The word hung in the air, a perfect description for how I felt. I flipped frantically through the pages. Some names were crossed out with a single, brutal line. Others glowed with a faint, pulsing, internal light. It was a catalog of souls caught in the gears of time. And then a small piece of folded paper fell from between the pages. It was brittle, old. I unfolded it carefully. The note inside was written in the same elegant script as my own entry. It read, "Welcome to the archive. You are now a keeper. The stories must be written, or they will be repeated." Suddenly, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The archivist, the entity I thought was my tormentor, wasn't a person. It was a role, a duty, a mantle passed down through time from one unwilling participant to the next. The archive wasn't a place, but a collection of lives, a safeguard against the chaos of fractured timelines and broken loops. The keepers were its guardians, and now I was one of them. The whispers, the shadows, the dreams of other lives, they weren't hallucinations. They were echoes from the archive, other stories bleeding through, other keepers, maybe, or other loops needing to be contained. My task, I realized, was not to escape. It was to understand, to find the others like me, to guide them, to help them remember, not so they could break their loop, but so they could understand their part in the grander design. So I began to write again, but not in my own diary. I opened the great obsidian ledger to a fresh page. The dreams hadn't stopped. In fact, they grew clearer. I was no longer just a passenger. I was an observer, a chronicler. I saw a young man named Leo, trapped in the same day in 1920s New York, and I recorded his desperation and his eventual dawning awareness. I saw a scientist named Kenji in a future Tokyo repeating a failed experiment that threatened his reality, and I documented his struggle for a breakthrough. Their lives became entries in the ledger. I was preserving their truths, hoping that by writing them down, I could prevent the loops from consuming them or from shattering their timelines completely. I was no longer a victim of the story, I was its scribe. But one entry in the ledger haunted me more than any other. It was near the very beginning, written in a script so old it was barely legible. The entry read, "The first archivist, unknown name, status, active." And next to it, the location, near, watching. The thought sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold leather of the book. The one who started all of this, the original prisoner or the original architect, was still out there, still active, watching me, watching us all. Was this first archivist a guide, a warden, or something else entirely? As I pondered this, my gaze fell to the very last page of the ledger. It was completely blank, a pristine, empty canvas waiting for a final story. But as I stared, mesmerized by the untouched surface, shimmering letters began to form on the page, as if written by an invisible hand in ink made of light. The words were for me. They read, "Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. The ledger wasn't just a record of the past. It was a prophecy for the future, my future. The loop was broken, but my journey through time had just begun. I was Nora Bennett. I am a keeper. And this is my archive.
Thank you so much for following Nora's journey with me. If you're as intrigued as I am, make sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment below with your theories about the first Archivist. I'd love to read them. Thanks for watching.